So this video is of interest to my Seventh Day Adventist friends and my Christian brothers and sisters who wish to reach out to our non-Christian Seventh Day Adventist friends that we have, either online or personal or family. So what you see here on the screen are patriarchs. Just a few. Upper left-hand corner you got Isaac, then we have Noah. Upper right-hand corner we have Abraham, right, following the command to sacrifice his son Isaac. In the lower right-hand corner we got Jacob, who is wrestling with an angel. And we have another very important key point in the Old Testament scriptures, and that is, primarily Exodus 20 is one place. Moses receives the Ten Commandments, the law of God. But here's the question. These patriarchs that I just mentioned, Isaac, Jacob, Noah, Abraham, did they observe the Ten Commandments? Did they observe the Sabbath? Inevitably, when I pose that question to my Adventist friends, what I often get is this verse right here. Genesis 26:5, where it says, "Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes and my laws." My Adventist friends say, "See my commandments." And I always say to my Adventist friends, I say, I understand every time you see the word commandments in the Word of God, you instantly think, to no other exclusions, you instantly think, the Ten Commandments, the law of God. And I say, sometimes when you see the word, you're absolutely right. That's true. That's what it means. But it's not all the time. And this is one of those cases when it's not all the time and it's not true. Let's look at just one example why I can say that. Right to Moses, again, right, speaking of the Ten Commandments, Moses is writing the book of Deuteronomy. He says this, "The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb," at Sinai. Then he said this, "Not with our fathers did the Lord make this covenant." God did not make the covenant, the picture you see in the middle of your screen, with the patriarchs. Moses himself is telling us that. Let's look at what the Apostle Paul says, Romans 5:12 through 14. He says this, "Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. For sin indeed was in the world before the law was given." Very clear. Sin was in the world, right? Cain and Abel. Before there was a written law given in the world. So we had sin, but we had no law, wasn't given. And then he just reiterates the same comment at the last part of this verse, "Sin indeed was in the world before the law was given." So see, there was no law given. That's Exodus 20. Prior to that, there was no written law, but there was indeed sin in the world. What else does the Apostle Paul have to say about the law? He says this is what I mean, the law which came 430 years afterwards. So by the way, that which comes afterwards means it did not exist previously. So when he's talking about the law and how it came 430 years afterwards, it's 430 years after Abraham. And it's a point of Abraham's life that he's making this 430-year mark to. Most of the commentators say it's the point in which Abraham received the Abrahamic covenants from God. That point in time, 430 years after that, we have the Mosaic covenants being given. So the Apostle Paul, what he is saying here, though, essentially is the law came 430 years afterwards. He said it didn't exist. It came afterwards. And then you can see in verse 19, the law was added. That which was added did not eternally exist, or it wouldn't have been added. So we have Galatians 3, Romans 5, Deuteronomy 5. We have Moses and the Apostle Paul both telling us the law did not exist with our fathers. The law was added. It was added 430 years after a covenant was made with Abraham. But the point is, it was added. It's not eternal. So, with that in mind, my Adventist friends, who usually get a little exasperated and say, well then, what are these commands, these commandments that I see in Genesis 26:5? And I say, good question. Because previous to Genesis 26:5, lots of things occurred. So let's go way back, chapter 12. Abram, he's not even called Abraham yet. He's called Abram. Gets a command from God to move, and he moves. Let's go 5 chapters later, Genesis 17. God gives Abraham a command to circumcise, honor circumcision, and Abraham does just that and honors circumcision. Genesis 22. Most everybody watching the slides are going to be familiar with Genesis 22, when God says, take your son Isaac and take him to the mountain and offer him as a sacrifice. And what did Abraham do? He followed the commands of God. Now we know what happened there at that scene, and that's not the point of this video. But the point of the video is Abraham followed the commands of God to sacrifice Isaac, to honor circumcision, and commanded to move. Genesis 12, 17, 22. So by the time we get to Genesis 26, and God is saying and talking about Abraham following my commandments, I wholeheartedly agree with Genesis 26:5. Abraham kept the commandments of God, and there they are on the screen in front of you. They aren't the 10 commandments, but they are the commandments of God. So I agree with Genesis 26:5. Now, you've seen these verses already, Galatians, Romans, Deuteronomy, which essentially say the law is not eternal. It existed at a certain point in time, even though there was sin in the world. But my Adventist friends often can't get over the fact that there was a point in time in which the 10 Commandments did not exist. There was no written law in the world. Abraham didn't know it. Isaac didn't know it. Noah didn't observe the Sabbath. My Adventist friends still get stuck on the upper left-hand corner of the screen here, Genesis 26:5. So then what I'll say to my Adventist friends is this. I'll say, you're insisting in keeping your theology, but that insistence now has created a biblical conflict. And here's the biblical conflict. Either the Bible is correct, Deuteronomy, Romans, Galatians, and the law is not eternal. Again, the law, 10 Commandments you see in the middle of the screen. It's not eternal. It came into existence at a point in time. Either that's true, or your Adventist theology is true, and that is the law is eternal, and Noah kept the Sabbath and practiced the 10 Commandments. If that's true, the Bible isn't true. If the Bible is true, and these verses that you see here are true, then Adventist theology is not. Both of these statements you see here in the blue box cannot be true simultaneously. Only one of them is true. Is it Adventist theology, or is it the Word of God? Choose wisely, my Adventist friends, and I hope you choose smartly. What 2 Corinthians 13:5 say? Examine ourselves to see whether we're in the faith. And if you're an Adventist and you still believe the law is eternal, then you're denying these 3 verses you see here on the screen, and you're siding with Adventist theology. You're siding with the word of men and women over the Word of God. And I hope you don't do that. I hope you, 2 Corinthians 13:5, examine yourself and use this as a good point to examine and see whether you're in the faith, whether you truly believe the Word of God, or you're going to believe Adventist theology over the Word of God.